Hello, everyone, and thanks for taking time to attend today's presentation. I am Diana Murray with ASAP Accounting and Payroll, and we've just finished up our webinar series on health insurance, and today's presentation is our final chapter in this series, Raising the Bar on Employee Benefits. And in today's presentation, we're going to talk about how workplace wellness factors into a healthy workforce. And while we're all grappling with health insurance options, or rather challenges with health insurance, one of the key factors that can provide a great benefit both to the business and to their individual employees is this idea of wellness. And this goes beyond just health insurance and even fitness, and really gets into the tools and resources to help to be well on a variety of factors: stress, diet, mindfulness, well-rounded life both in and out of the office. So having a healthy and engaged employees has a direct impact on a business and even on your bottom line. And we hope today's presentation will hit home on a few of these different levels. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about ASAP. This webinar is sponsored by ASAP Accounting and Payroll, and ASAP started in 1990 in Telluride, Colorado. And we now have 3 offices in Colorado. That's Telluride, Durango, and Denver. And we assist clients with payroll processing and bookkeeping services. We like to say at ASAP, our aim is to keep things as simple as possible, and really with the goal of getting you back to do what you love, and whether that be focusing on your business and growth or spending more time with your family. You can learn more about ASAP at www.businessasap.com. And now to jump into our presentation, I'm excited to introduce you to today's presenter and our topic. And I want to introduce you to Rebecca with Good Life Wellness Solutions. Rebecca is a health and wellness professional with 22 years of experience, and she's committed to helping people discover their healthiest potential. She holds a BA in psychology and certifications in personal fitness training and group exercise, and is currently working on obtaining her master's degree in industrial organizational psychology. Rebecca has spent nearly a decade focusing on employee well-being and having designed and managed an award-winning wellness program for Hilltop Community Resources in Grand Junction, Colorado. She is now co-owner and president of Good Life Wellness Solutions, an organization committed to improving individual lives and communities by delivering effective and affordable workplace well-being programs to small businesses. And with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Rebecca and start our presentation today. Thanks, Rebecca.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Diana, for that nice introduction. I really appreciate it. And I loved what you said about helping your clients really get back to what matters most. That's a similar mission that we share. So with no further ado, we're going to just jump right into this presentation today. Okay, so like Diana said, workplace wellness can be a really key aspect of ensuring that your employees are really coming to work and doing their best. When they feel well, when they feel supported at work in their health and well-being, can really be this great magical combination that gets them to bring their best selves to work. So I wanted to share a story about this woman. This woman is my mother, and about 3 years ago, actually, my father, he had sustained a stroke, and she had been taking care of him for about 10 years while he was unable to speak and was unable to move his right side. So for a decade of her life, she was caring for my father in this condition. So what that meant was that she kind of put her own life on hold. And while it was really difficult to lose my father when we did, in some ways, it freed her up to be able to have new goals for herself. And so one of the goals that she had was to really start living her best life. And part of that was, being able to go travel and see my siblings and her grandchildren that live across the country. And she wanted to start volunteering for the schools and maybe in her church. Well, about a year after my dad passed, she wasn't doing any of these things. And we thought, maybe she's still just mourning. Maybe she's having a hard time. But one day I showed up to her house and I was shocked to see her face. She was completely white, like a vampire. And I said, Mom, what is going on? What's wrong? You don't look well. And she said, oh, no, I'm fine. I need to put some lipstick on. And I said, no, Mom, this is something much more than just needing some lipstick. You look like a vampire. So I managed to, after some time, convince her I needed to take her to the hospital right away. And we got her to the hospital. They did some tests. And sure enough, she needed 5 units of blood. She was in major need of a blood transfusion. And it turns out that she had had this slow kind of leak of blood in her digestive tract that had led to this critical point where her red blood cells could no longer reproduce. The iron had dropped so low, and she was then suddenly found herself in this critical state. So while we kind of assumed that my mom would jump right in and be able to do some of these things she hadn't been able to do for so long, what we realized was she needed to have some certain basic needs met before she was able to do some of those other things. So if you look here at the top where my mom's goal was to live her best life, in order to do that, she wanted to complete certain activities. But in order to do that, she needed to have this level of energy to be able to do them. And then it really just came down to the basics. In order to have energy, she needed to have the appropriate iron levels. And in order to have appropriate iron levels, we needed to get to the root of the problem, which was this health issue that she had. So once we were able to fix the leak, so to speak, she did improve, and she has been able to do all of those things that she wanted to do to live her best life. And I don't think that it's a huge stretch to say that similar thing is happening in our organizations. So most of us are in business. A lot of us have, missions and reasons that we're in business. But in order to stay in business, we really need to focus on growth and profit. It's the reality of being in business. In order to have growth and profit, we need to have productive employees. And by productive employees, we're talking about employees that offer good customer service, that are able to do good quality work, who are innovative, who want to stick around, who are aware enough to where they're not getting in accidents every single day. In order to have that level of productivity, we also need to be able to tap into that effort that an employee will either offer or not offer, depending on maybe how much they feel plugged into the workplace. In order to get that effort, though, we need to start looking at some of the basic things, just like my mother. Do they have enough energy to deliver that effort? And if not, is there something foundational, something that is tied to their well-being and health that might be impacting their ability to bring their best selves to work? So you can see it's all tied together, and more than well-being being just kind of a nice to have program that you want to slap on as maybe a way to recruit top talent, which is a great idea, you can see that it's actually foundational to a growing, thriving business. So along those lines, this is a really busy slide, so don't worry about it too much. I'm just going to point out a few things. One is that we need to start to shift the conversation about employee well-being as being kind of an extra, something you'll get to when you have the time or resources, and instead start looking at it as an investment. So we know we have some chronic problems in this country, and most of our businesses are representative of those problems because we employ people who live here. And so we see high rates of obesity. 2 out of every 3 adults now are overweight or obese, and that's costing us, not just with our healthcare costs, but it's costing us in our communities. We see chronic disease such as heart disease, diabetes, and depression. This leads to missed days at work. In fact, if somebody has just one chronic disease, they on average miss 20 more days a year than someone who has none. That's a huge difference. And then we also see chronic diseases tend to cluster. So people who have more than one, which is very typical, miss twice that many days. So you can see quickly that absenteeism costs are really high when we're not looking at ways to help people improve their well-being. We also see low levels of engagement. So the most recent Gallup poll that came out showed that 33% of the workforce is engaged at work, which means the large majority is not engaged. They're just coming to work, they're kind of phoning it in, doing the bare minimum to not get fired. But interestingly, when we just look at a subsection of the US workforce, that's organizations that are viewed as inspiring health, those organizations actually see 80% engagement levels. So that's a big deal, especially when we're looking at customer service ratings and turnover, things that are really tied to a person's level of engagement. That can save us a lot of money too. And then that leads us to turnover. We know turnover costs us money. I like to find the most conservative statistics that I can find when I'm talking about these things. So when we're looking at how much it costs to replace an employee, you know, and the average of a $10 an hour employee, which is actually lower than our minimum wage here in Colorado now, will cost you over $3,000 just to replace that employee. And so you can see if your turnover is high, that's costing you year after year. But interestingly, again, with these organizations where employees perceive that their employer cares about them and they have a well-being plan, 64% of those employees say that they plan to work there for the next 5 years. So it builds in some loyalty when you demonstrate that you care about your employees' well-being. So Diana had mentioned that I created and managed the wellness program at Hilltop Community Resources here in Grand Junction, Colorado, and I just wanted to share that experience as a little bit of a case study. So in 2010, Hilltop brought me in to design a wellness program for them. Of course, like a lot of organizations, one of their biggest reasons was they needed to get a handle on their skyrocketing healthcare costs. Now, unlike a lot of organizations, Hilltop is a self-insured organization up to a certain amount, and then a secondary insurance kicks in. So they're seeing those costs really directly on their operating budget. But we're all seeing those costs rise as we see premiums escalate. But what they really needed to do initially was look at a way to continue to be able to offer health insurance to their employees by getting a handle on the costs. So in 2010, when I started, we implemented a plan with the hopes of just kind of bending that curve just a little bit to a more sustainable level. And what you can see happened between 2010 and 2011 is that we really kind of broke that trend and managed to stay under budgeted expectations for years to come. Another perk that may pertain to you, even if you are a fully insured organization, is workers' compensation costs. Those can drop, and also some workers' compensation insurers will look at whether or not you have a wellness program and factor that in to the cost of your premium. But when employees are more healthy, they're more aware, they are able to bounce back from an injury more quickly, that can save you money there as well. The other thing to remember is that workplace wellness programs, just like any investment, there is kind of it's the long game. You're playing the long game. You don't want these check the box wellness programs and look after a year and say, oh, this isn't working. What we really need to do is hang in there and wait until we can really enculturate it into our businesses, where it becomes just the way we do things around here. And of course, that tends to happen the more people that participate. And you can see it took us some time to build those numbers up. You know, over the course of 6 years, we reached this great sweet spot of having the majority of employees participating in the program, but it did take time. So now what? We can know what to do, just like anything, but then we must apply what we know, and we can be willing to do something, but there's a difference between that and actually doing it. So how do we move the needle from knowing to doing? Well, an interesting fact about me is that in the last 22 years of my career, one of the things that I have been is a personal trainer. And so when I was brought into Hilltop, I really had to draw from my existing knowledge about what I knew worked to help get people to help motivate people to change their behavior. And so I found myself having to put together a program really quickly for them. And I realized in some ways there really isn't a difference between some of the things I had learned as a personal trainer and some of the things that we needed to do as an organization to help employees live healthier lives. So we're going to take 7 of those things that I learned as a personal trainer and apply them to workplace wellness. And the first one of those is walk the talk. So I love this quote by Benjamin Franklin: well done is better than well said. And of course, if you're a parent, you know that that is true. We can say all we want, but if we are telling our kids one thing and doing another, it's really hard to convince them to actually change. And the same thing holds true in our organizations. We need leadership support. In order for wellness programs to be successful, I would say this is the number one thing we need. So think about if you had a personal trainer and your personal trainer, ate donuts every day for breakfast, was 100 pounds overweight, didn't exercise. It would probably be really hard to want to take care of your own health. It would be hard to have them inspire you to make any changes yourself. And we see that with leadership support relative to wellness programs. So this study, this survey came from the American Psychological Association, and what it was doing, it was comparing organizations that had low senior leadership support with their wellness programs and those who had high senior leadership support. And you can see the huge difference between the organizations with low and high leadership support in all of these different factors that are really interesting metrics that tie closely to operational success. So whether we're talking about employees having a perception that their organization supports their healthy lifestyle, or we're looking at the percentage of employees who are satisfied with their job or plan to leave their job, those who are motivated to do their best, or those who are likely to recommend your organization as a good place to work, we see much higher levels with those organizations that have high leadership support. So that's got to be number one. The first thing we set out to do is to get that support. How do we do that? Well, we do it through leading through action. I break this up into 2 different steps. So the first thing we need to kind of do is take an inventory of our organizations to see what unwritten rules, maybe behaviors that we're modeling, what are some common practices that we just kind of accept that are actually undermining our employees' ability to make healthy choices. So some examples might be that it's common practice in your organization to reward with food like donuts on Friday or pizza, at the end of a really hard project. Maybe the behaviors that you model are never taking breaks or eating lunch at your desk. And so employees get the message that, yes, I'm told I need to take breaks for my mental and physical health, but what I see my manager do is not take breaks. So clearly that's the way to get ahead. So first, we really need to look at those things because it's really difficult to promote healthy habits when the systems and structures in our environment and in our organizations don't support that. But once we get a handle on that, then we can start looking at ways to promote healthy habits. So for leaders, at all levels, what we really want from them is for them to be participating in the programs, for them to lead some of the programs. I love it when I see CEOs send out a memo that says, I'm going for a hike this weekend and I invite anybody who wants to come with me to come. Leaders who encourage others and even create a recognition program around celebrating employees for their healthy choices they're making. We can even go so far as to create policies that support healthy habits, like tobacco-free workplaces, or maybe there's a policy around the types of food that your organization is going to buy with organization money. All right, tip number 2. This is understanding that people are your biggest asset. You know, it's interesting, as a personal trainer, I actually stopped doing one-on-one personal training because I realized that people themselves in small groups actually influence each other, and they become your biggest asset. So what's interesting about this is when you can recruit people to help you, and what we like to call them are wellness champions, when you can create a champion network within your organization, that can be the secret sauce after getting leadership involved to really transforming your organization and creating new social norms. But you need people to follow you. You need people to jump in. And so I'm going to show you this quick little video.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED, we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not 2 nuts, 3 is a crowd, and the crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that, TED. Thanks.
Okay, so I just love that video. It demonstrates so well this point that, you know, we do need leaders, we do need people to be first, but even more importantly, we need those people who are going to step up and follow and make what the leader is doing look like it's the really cool thing to do. And that's what your wellness champions can do. So ideally, you're going to choose people from across your organization in different departments, different leadership levels to all be your champions, and find those people who are just kind of good at getting people to follow them, and that can make a huge difference. The next tip is creating connection, and this kind of follows along with that idea of the group and the power of people. when I'm talking about the way I now do personal training, because I do still train some of the clients I've had for years, we train in groups. And that connection that has been created over the years has been remarkable. We've brought people together who have never been friends in the past, but because they're connected and they feel like they share a common purpose, they are very consistent with their exercise and have been for years. And the same holds true in our organizations. And some of it has to do with this thing called the theory of social contagion. What's really fascinating is that behaviors are contagious just like a virus, and that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. So if you think about the peer group that you have, there's a common kind of phrase that is you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And when you think about how much time we spend with the people at work, oftentimes it's more time overall than anyone else we spend time with, our families and friends included. So it does matter the types of behaviors that are introduced into our workplaces and that are tolerated in our workplaces. For example, found this super fascinating. If your friend gains weight, you are 57% more likely to gain weight yourself. And what's even more fascinating, if a friend of a friend gains weight, you're still 20% more likely to gain weight because you share a common social circle. The same thing holds true for smoking. If a friend starts smoking, you're 36% more likely to stop or to start smoking. But luckily, the reverse of that's true as well. If your friend stops smoking and you're a smoker, you're 34% more likely to stop smoking too. There are other correlations too between the social behaviors of the people around you and then what you end up doing that are tied to drinking behaviors, loneliness, happiness, and a whole range of behaviors. And so it stands to reason that if we can be intentional about the behaviors that we really foster in our organizations, we can either be supporting healthy behaviors or we can be undermining supporting behaviors or healthy behaviors. And we need to really consider what's happening in our organizations now and how can we maybe introduce some healthy changes. Next is avoiding one size fits all. So I had to learn this on early in my career as a personal trainer, that I couldn't give the same weights to my 95-pound, 65-year-old woman client and my 50-year-old male client. I couldn't do the same workouts for my 83-year-old male client, who's still going strong, by the way, but whose joints are getting a little older. I need to tailor things for him. The same is true for the way we design our wellness programs to really accommodate everybody's needs. We're not all in the same place in our journeys. And so a wellness program that comes in and tells you that this is the one way to do things, we need to be wary of that because there's not one way. We need to account for the diverse workforces that we have. We need to identify what their needs are. We need to ask them. Sometimes we like to introduce new programs and we think we know what people want, but I have never been surprised more than when we do an employee needs and interest survey or we do a focus group for an organization before we launch their program and find out that, what the employer thought would be a good wellness program design really wasn't what people wanted or needed at all. So it's really important to identify needs before you get started. And sometimes I get asked the question, well, where do we start? There are so many needs tied to well-being: physical needs, mental and emotional needs, financial needs, environmental needs, social needs. They're all tied to our ability to be healthy and well. And I would say, just like this picture depicts, it really doesn't matter. Just start, because they're so interconnected. If I go on a walk 3 times a week for 30 minutes for my physical health, you better bet I'm also doing a big service to my mental and emotional health. If I focus on my financial well-being and I get out of debt, you better bet I've now reduced my stress and I've improved my mental and physical health. So they're all tied together. You can really just start. Don't get tied up in not knowing where. The next tip is leveraging existing motivation. So this has been interesting as a trainer. Oftentimes, they have an idea of what they want to do in terms of their health and well-being goals, and I may have an idea of what they should do. So several years ago, I had decided I'm going to train everybody to be ready to hike a 14er for the summer. And we worked hard. We really did. And I would say 80% of my group of clients made this goal and actually reached this goal. But there was this 20% of people that, quite honestly, they just didn't want to go hike a 14er. And so I could have pushed them all day long and all year long to do this thing that I wanted them to do. But it was easier for me to then take a step back and say, well, what is it that you already want to do? And let's figure out how we can make that happen. This is tied to a model of behavior that I find super fascinating. I was fortunate enough to train with BJ Fogg about a year ago in his behavior model and behavior design to help me kind of understand how do we design interventions in the workplace to get people to change their behavior. So this applies not only to employee wellness, but you might find some applications of this behavior model elsewhere in your businesses. But the gist of it is that for any behavior to happen, there needs to be three things that occur at the same time: motivation, ability to do the behavior, and some kind of trigger. And by trigger, we mean like a prompt or a cue that says, hey, do this thing right now. So when motivation is high, well, actually I should say motivation runs on this continuum from high to low, and ability runs on a continuum from easy to do to hard to do. So when motivation is high and something's easy to do, that behavior is going to be plotted right there. If motivation is low and still easy to do, it's going to be here. So give you one example. Let's say your phone rings and your phone is right there in front of you. Well, the trigger is the ringing phone. Your motivation could either be high or low depending on who you think it is. So let's say it's your best friend calling. So your motivation is high. And of course, it's easy for you to do because you know how to answer the phone. But let's say the phone rings again, and this time you suspect it is a sales call. Well, now your motivation is low, and even though it's still easy for you to do, it doesn't matter how many times that phone rings, you are not going to answer the phone. So there is this trade-off between motivation and ability, and you're always trying to find that balance when you're trying to get people to change their behavior. That balance is demonstrated by this line called the action line. So any behavior that happens above this action line, it is going to happen. It means that motivation and ability to do has hit a sweet spot enough for that person to actually make a change. But if the behavior falls in this area of the model, doesn't matter how many times you trigger the person to do it, they're not going to do it. So let's take a common wellness intervention, and that is getting people to drink more water. So let's say somebody really hates water and they work out in the field and they don't even have access to water. So what that means is their motivation is low and it's hard for them to do, and it doesn't matter how many times you send them a little trigger email to drink their 8 glasses of water a day, they're not going to do it. But that just means you have to figure out, well, what are we going to do? In this case, you have two choices. You can either increase their motivation by maybe offering a reward or an incentive so that you move that behavior above the action line, or you can maybe at least make it easier for them to do and maybe get it above the action line here. So one way you could motivate is, again, by offering some kind of incentive. Another thing you could do is just bring some delicious looking water out to the field so it's right there, easy for them to get. The same can hold true even if a behavior is, you're highly motivated to do it, but it's hard to do. So now take that same water example If somebody is highly motivated to drink water, but it's still too hard for them to do because they have to get in their truck and drive, a few blocks to go get it, then they're still not going to do it. So now we just need to look at, all right, how do we make it easier for that person to do that behavior? So when you're thinking about the trade-off between motivation and ability, especially when we're talking in the context of well-being in the workplace, it's really, really hard, shy of offering super big incentives to change somebody's motivation. But what we can do is change their ability. And so that's how we optimize for success, which is my point number 6. When we think of behavior, there's 3 elements that are coming into play. There's something about the person, their skill level, their ability to do something. There's the action that you're wanting them to take. And then there's the context, so the environment that it exists where the behavior is going to need to happen. So with this idea of, instead of trying to motivate people to do something, which is often how we talk about behavior change, it's like, how can I get so-and-so to do such and such? Instead, if we're talking about how can we make it easier for so-and-so to do such and such, we can look in these 3 areas and find clues. So let's take the example of, we want our employees to start taking those 15-minute breaks because we know it's important. So when it comes to the person, what we can do is maybe just do some education. We can train them on why breaks are important. When it comes to the action, one of the best things we can do to make things easier is to maybe reduce the action that we're trying to get them to do to something smaller. So if we're trying to ultimately get them to take a 15-minute break, but they're taking no breaks at all right now, maybe we say, hey, why don't you start with a 2-minute break? Then they can get in the habit of doing that 2-minute break, and over time can reach that 15-minute break. And then we can look at context. Maybe people know breaks are important and the 15 minutes is doable for them, but the reality is you don't have a break room that's comfortable for them to go take a break in. And so they don't go take a break because there's simply no place to go. That could also be influencing the behavior and is something that as organizations we have a lot of control over. So what we want to do is to really look at those 3 areas with any given behavior and identify what are the barriers and how can we make that behavior easier. All right, last but not least, again, as a personal trainer, I'll have clients that are doing really well, going strong, and then suddenly sustain an injury. And at that point, I can't give them the same workouts that I had. I need to be willing to adapt. I need to be willing to not be so rigid in thinking I know what they need to do and not ask them for their feedback. How does this feel? What do you think about this exercise? And the same thing holds true for our workplace wellness programs. We need to be flexible. We need to adapt. And in order to do that, we really need to understand the program's effectiveness over time. If we don't know what's happening, if we're not measuring anything, we won't know how to be flexible and what changes to make. So because wellness is a long-term investment, it makes sense to look at some of these earlier goals in year 1 and really target these types of things like program awareness. Do your people even know you have a wellness program? Participation rates. Those are things that you can really impact in year 1 and into year 2 and on. And then you can look at those numbers of barriers to participation. So maybe you take a survey and you see how many people know about your wellness program at the beginning of the year, and then you do the same survey at the end of the year. And if those awareness levels have shot up, if participation rates have shot up, then that's successful for year 1 because we know that that participation is going to lead to some of these other outcomes over time. In years 2 or 3, here's where you may want to start doing some correlations and looking at your absenteeism data, maybe taking your employee satisfaction survey that you do and correlating it with the introduction of your new wellness program. Health risk assessment data. If you do a health risk assessment or a biometric screening, you can look at those trends over the years. And then you can look at turnover rates. And while we're not conducting, a double-blind study where we can know for sure that the wellness program had a causal relationship with these things, what we can do is see how they are tied together and how they trend together, and then we can infer certain things about the effectiveness of our programs. And then when we look at years 3 to 5, here's where we start seeing some of those behavioral changes actually translate into improved health and reduced costs. So claims costs might go down, workers' comp costs might go down. Maybe you're having to do less recruitment and new training because your turnover rates went down. Maybe you see improvements in your morale and culture, and you take those pulse surveys and you're doing really well. So those are some of the things that we can look at to assess program effectiveness and then make changes as needed in following years. So ultimately, our mission at Good Life is really to try to find those first followers so that we're not these lone nuts out in the world, and we're really looking for those heroes. Those heroes could be you, it could be other people in your workplace, but when we do something so profound as care about our employee well-being, we see a lot of benefits. We can also tap into our employees' internal motivation to do their best. To get people to do things long-term, external rewards only go so far. They're really only good at nudging people in the right direction. What we really want is employees who come to work and they're motivated intrinsically to do their best. And just like with the example of my mother, when you're feeling well, you're able to do that much more readily. We can improve our business outcomes with productive, happy employees. At the end of the day, we all know our employees, they are the most important thing to our ability to be successful. And so it just makes sense, and it just feels right that we invest in their health and well-being. And lastly, you can become part of a movement to help improve lives. And not just the lives of the people that work for you, but think about that social contagion theory and how when they make changes in their lives, they're also influencing the lives of their families and other people in the community. And so in this way, we're also contributing to the common good in our communities by creating not only workplaces that are healthier and well, but communities that are healthy and well. So I invite you to become part of that movement, and together, let's help people live their best lives. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We appreciate your time.
Awesome. I've got a couple of questions or points that I wanted to kind of bring up that I heard in your presentation. And one of the things that I wanted you to kind of unpack a little more is give me some examples of how Good Life can help in terms of wellness program for different shapes and sizes of businesses or even diverse groups.
Sure. I think one of the best ways we accomplish this is, like I said, always starting with that employee survey or focus groups and determining what it is that they want and need. And then it's making sure that a wellness program isn't just tied to, physical health. I think sometimes organizations tend to gravitate toward, the big, lose weight challenge or, the steps challenge. And while that might work for some people, it won't work for everybody. So one of the specific things that we do is we try to gamify our wellness programs by assigning point values to participating in a variety of activities. So maybe we assign point values to doing things that employees are already doing or that we want to motivate them to do, such as just doing their annual wellness exam. Maybe we assign points to taking your breaks. Maybe we assign points to participating in that fun wellness challenge. But if we offer a variety of things for people to do, then they can pick and choose from a menu of things that feel relevant to them in their lives.
Awesome. And do you all use an app or a program? Tell us a little bit more about your platform.
Sure. So yes, we do have an online platform that helps facilitate all of this. When I was at Hilltop, we had a vendor who was providing this service for us, and it was really, really expensive. And so one of the things I was set out to do was to create something that was more affordable, because what I recognized is that small businesses don't have the big budgets that the large corporations have, and that they've been doing these wellness programs for decades. So how can we bring this technology to the smaller businesses? And so we created a really streamlined platform that gives you everything you need, but nothing you don't. It's online based, it's mobile friendly. We have intentionally avoided the use of a daily app. Although it is, again, mobile friendly. We are encouraging programs to be defined by the amount that they connect real people in real life, and we're less about wanting to make sure we trigger the use of an app every day. So that's kind of how we structure the program, creating this hub, this central hub online that delivers the program, delivers educational content and resources.
And is there any employer that's too small or too big?
That's a really good question, and something that we really look at when we are doing that initial consultation with an organization. I don't think any company is too small to have a wellness program, but they may be too small to need a wellness platform, for sure. So we tend to say that companies with 50 or more employees start to do really well with that online platform, because at that point, you probably have people located in different departments that you might want to unify in this kind of central way with technology. Under 50, we may just talk about it. Kind of depends on where your employees are located. But maybe your program could be as simple as offering monthly wellness trainings, doing some low-tech wellness challenges that we can help you do, with just like paper trackers. So we really try to meet that need as well, but we'll be completely honest with you. We don't want to sell you something you don't need, and wouldn't push the platform on you if you were really small.
Well, that's really exciting, and I think wellness is a big buzzword these days, and I think it's a really important investment that employers can make, both for their employees and also, again, it's going to impact their business and ultimately their bottom line with having engaged employees and even engaged clients. So thank you very much, Rebecca, and we appreciate your presentation today, and I hope everyone has a nice day.